Me today have City Manager Spencer Cronk, Assistant City Manager Ray Ariano, who's over Public Safety, APD's Chief of Staff Robin Henderson is here, as well as other members of APD's executive staff. I'm pleased to be here today. We are releasing the 2020 Protests and Riots After Action Report, which is known as an AAR hereafter, on behalf of the Austin Police Department. This document has been in draft form since the spring of 2021, has been updated between that time and now to reflect the changes that have been made to policy, training, and the structures. So as a department, we have continued to improve. I'm proud of the progress we have made and also understand that we have a lot of work to do. Let me begin by defining what we mean as an after-action report. It is a critical tool used to analyze an event, the response to that event, and the outcome, so that as an agency we may improve and better serve the community. The report also outlines a roadmap for safe and effective responses in the future. The report is a formalized process that allows us to take into consideration multiple viewpoints regarding the full picture of events and create a shared understanding of what occurred. We use the AAR to identify what worked and what did not, propose measures to address any problematic issues that were identified, and better understand lessons learned from a collective viewpoint. The review process yielded some key findings for APD. Before getting into some of the shortcomings identified, I would like to acknowledge two important factors that demonstrated strengths within APD. First, we recognize that the less lethal beanbag munition did not perform as expected, which resulted in unintended injuries. Once this became apparent during the protests, APD leadership explicitly prohibited the use of the less lethal beanbag shotguns. This action demonstrated the department's ability to adapt to evolving circumstances. Second, the department employees worked relentlessly under arduous conditions, enduring substantial abuse. This dedication and professionalism demonstrated a steadfast commitment to service and public safety. I'm incredibly proud of our employees and the work that they do every day. At the same time, we were able to identify several areas where the department could have performed better. These included planning and analysis of potential threats, operating under a unified command and control structure, following best practices on use of force reporting, and the necessity for comprehensive and streamlined internal and external communication. The AAR identifies 17 key areas of analysis and lists out problem identification, findings, recommendations, and subsequent implementation of improvements. I will not be going point by point during this media availability. Rather, I want to highlight some of the areas that we have been concentrating on as a department to improve. First, de-escalation techniques and training. APD has revamped its training efforts to ensure that all officers are thoroughly and regularly trained in effective de-escalation techniques for a variety of situations. These techniques include tactics such as active listening, clear verbal communication, maintaining a safe distance, explanations of actions and any consequences, and securing additional resources. This training is occurring in both cadet training as part of our new academy model, as well as during in-service training with our current officers. Next, improvements to mobile field force. APD's deployment of department resources highlighted a need for regular and ongoing mobile field force, crowd management, and riot control training for all officers. The clarified process and training was highlighted when in early May of this year, large-scale protests occurred in Austin related to the Supreme Court decision affecting Roe v. Wade. APD was poised and prepared to effectively support the citizens of Austin in their efforts to participate in safe demonstrations free of property destruction and violence. Finally, training for an integrated response within various APD units. In the early days of the 2020 protests, all APD personnel were on tactical alert and required a great deal of collaboration with the department's special response team and with one another. Not everyone was familiar with the responsibilities, the duties, and procedures of SRT or the other specialized units, making a coordinated response more challenging to achieve. APD now conducts integrated department-wide trainings across the various specialized response units. These collaborative joint operation trainings allow the different tactical response units to familiarize themselves with the roles and capabilities of the other units and to be better prepared for a thorough and efficient rollout of mobile field force in the future. As a final note, I want to address what I think will be the prevailing question related to the release of this after-action report. Why now? Why did it take so long to release? The review and analysis of the protests from 2020 have been ongoing since that summer. From the very beginning of the protests and riots, APD has been working to identify problem situations and responses so that strategies that are more effective could be employed. I recognize that it has been just over 2 years since the protests and riots occurred, but please know that APD has been working diligently to ensure progress towards the identified areas in need of improvement. While an initial analysis of the protests was prepared in early 2021, APD experienced a change in department leadership around that time, which prompted a hold on releasing the AAR. When I began in my position as interim chief of police in the spring of 2021, I worked diligently to address numerous focus areas, and the efforts to reimagine public safety became front and center for the department and for me. Much of this reimagining work really grew from the summer 2020 protests and the issues that we had begun to identify in the AAR. While the actual report was on the back burner for a bit, the work APD was doing to create stronger and more accountable policies and procedures was always underway. Standing here today, I feel confident in the release of this report and its inclusion of implementation steps for each focus area. We have accomplished a great deal in the past 2 years and fully recognize that we have more to achieve. My closing message for this media availability is this: I can promise you that we will never see another response similar to the one in summer of 2020. The way that we have changed our policies, our training, and the cross-training that we're doing across the department will ensure that we are better prepared, better trained, better equipped than we've ever been before, and that we will not see a repeat of the events of summer 2020. Estoy orgulloso de presentar esta tarde el informe posterior a la acción de APD para las protestas de 2020. Hemos estado trabajando en este informe durante casi 2 años y estamos contentos de poder finalmente presentarlo aquí, completo y sin editar. Tiene 17 áreas que se examinaron, se hicieron recomendaciones y en última instancia se implementaron esas recomendaciones. Todavía tenemos mucho trabajo por hacer, pero este documento puede ayudar a hallar esos esfuerzos en el futuro. That concludes our prepared comments. The after-action report will be officially distributed at 2 p.m. And I am here if there are any questions.
Would this analysis and these changes have been made and reviewed even if there wasn't public outcry or suits against the city?
Yes, we had actually started the after-action review process well before any lawsuits had been filed, and of course, there were ongoing complaints that were filed with the Office of Police Oversight, but that was somewhat independent of the actual after-action report.
Is there a specific policy when it comes to protests? Or as a department, are you guys going to review the actions after every big one, like the one that we saw in May as well?
So there is always a debrief at the very least that occurs after every large-scale incident that we respond to, and then for something as large as this protest, an after-action report is appropriate.
Do y'all think that the injuries to protesters were a result of the expired munitions, or do you think it was the fact that officers were shooting people in the head with these munitions? For example, if someone was shot in the eye with a munition that was not expired, I would imagine that they would still be injured.
So as I explained kind of earlier in this process, the beanbag munitions did not perform the way that we had thought they would or that it was intended. And therefore, we've stopped using those. I think that how all that, is going to play out as some of our officers are under indictment right now related to the use of those munitions I think is going to play itself out in court.
Anything you can disclose about the agents that you're referring to, the ones that are in administrative leave because of all of this?
There's no news on that right now. They're still on administrative leave, and we're awaiting any updates that might come from court.
Have those officers said anything about what they did intend with those less than lethal beanbag rounds?
Well, certainly they participated in interviews with Internal Affairs. That is information right now that I cannot disclose, but certainly that information has been at some point gathered from them.
How long did it take to take those out of use that day?
It was 2 days into the protest before their use was suspended.
I think you touched on it, but what's going to be like the biggest changes now?
There's a number of changes, and you'll actually see them in the report. There's 17 different focus areas. It's everything from command and control structure, making sure that we're embracing the incident command structure, deployment strategies. There's a number of different areas. And just remember, an after-action report is designed to help the entity, in this case the police department, analyze the event, look at what the weaknesses were, perhaps in its response, and then learn from those and get better. And I think that we've demonstrated that in this report.
Is APD going to change who is on SRT?
There's been a significant turnover in the leadership in SRT over the last couple of years. And you'll see also in the report there is some description as to how much training. They're doing much more training than they've ever done before now to prepare, as well as that kind of cross-jurisdictional training that we've been talking about, that they're working with other specialized units so that we aren't relying simply on SRT if we have something like this happen again. We're going to have other units that are going to be able to assist them and have a much better and much more coordinated response.
Did y'all conclude that it's better to have a larger SRT or a smaller team that's SRT?
I can tell you that today we have a smaller team than we had in 2020. The analysis was not really about should we increase or decrease the size of SRT. It was more about that cross-training piece.
I think you may have touched on it, but what do you say about these I believe, the 20 or so officers being indicted?
I think that I've made comments on that. I'm not going to add to that right now.
You did touch on this, but talk about the difficulties that your officers faced those days as well.
Yeah, you'll see beginning in the executive summary of the report that gives just a very brief idea because I think in some regard there was a thought that these were very peaceful protests. In the early days we had over 500 either attempted assaults or assaults on police officers in a variety of different ways, with things being thrown at them, them being physically assaulted during that time. And so there is just a brief touch on that. But as I said in my statement, they were steadfast and maintained professionalism throughout.
Are there going to be check-ins in the future to make sure the new policies are working?
So we regularly will brief out, to Public Safety Commission, Public Safety Committee. The Office of Police Oversight remains engaged on any outstanding cases from this and moving forward. And so those are really touch points for our community that there is still a large degree of visibility into what's going on in the department. Importantly, I want to note that this report is being released complete and unredacted. Okay, so we redacted nothing out of this report in an air of transparency to make sure that the public fully saw the issues that were faced and how we dealt with them.
Do you feel that officers were underprepared and undertrained?
Yes.
And why is that?
I think that we had never faced anything of this scale. We were prepared for something that would have been much lower in scope. We're the state capital. We deal particularly in the summer and then during legislative sessions with protests every weekend. We were underprepared for this event, without a doubt.
I think you mentioned, instead of the beanbags, and I'll look at the report, but what are you guys going to use instead of that?
There is a reference in there to a new system known as Pepperball that is less damaging if you are hit by one, as opposed to a less lethal munition, and that are much more effective for crowd control. All right. Thank you all very much. Thanks for being here today.